Paul.
Good morning. My name is Paul Pumphrey, and I'm with an organization by the name of Friends of the Congo. And when we look at AFRICOM in Africa, as well as even the European military involvement in Africa, we must see it as a geostrategic move for looting the resources of Africa. And today, more so than ever, because the major resources for our electronic industry, for our high-tech industry, those resources are found in huge quantities in Africa. And no place more in Africa than that of the Congo. So basically, we're looking at a situation wherein the United States historically has played the behind-the-scene role in Africa, and now find itself in a position where it has to play a more overt role militarily in Africa. Often people think that the United States involvement in the Congo is something of recent phenomena, but the reality is the United States has been involved with the Congo for over 125 years. Let's remember King Leopold never went to Africa, nor did anybody from Belgium survey the Congo. So explain to me how all of a sudden King Leopold could request control over the greater Congo at the 1884-85 conference of when Europe was dividing up Africa, if they didn't even know where the Congo was. It was clear to me that the United States played that role. The United States at that time had the Ford making cars, needing rubber. And they knew that if Great Britain or France, the more industrial parts of Europe, got control over the rubber plantations or the wild rubber trees inside the Congo, that they would have to pay a higher price for the rubber. So the United States cut a deal with King Leopold, a fairly undeveloped European head of state, to claim control at that conference for the Congo region. And so the United States was able to get the cake and eat it too, because no matter what kind of crimes that were done inside the Congo to force the Congolese to harvest more rubber, the blame went to King Leopold, not the United States. A similar situation happened in the apartheid South Africa. They used the Boers as a means to get the blame for the atrocities of apartheid. But interesting enough, where did the concept of Bantustans come from? I would definitely believe it came from Indian reservations in the United States. And so the United States has historically played this role in Africa from behind the scenes. But because of a new element in the geopolitical and economic arena of Africa, known as China, the United States now has to play a more overt role. The United States had been involved in the Congo for over 125 years, and in that period of time, never built one school, never built one hospital, never even built a road. But it did supply Mobutu with hundreds of millions and even billions of dollars worth of military equipment to keep him in power inside the Congo, so that they would have access to looting the riches of the Congo. But then that changed when they discovered the power of coltan. Coltan being a mineral that's used in every type of sophisticated electronic equipment on the earth today. And they figured out that the Congo had 64% of all the coltan in the world. So whoever controlled the coltan in the Congo controlled not only the electronic industry, but the financial might of the world. And at that point, they realized that their puppet that they had put in power in the Congo was too greedy. And if he had figured out the value of coltan, there was no way that U.S. corporations could get an advantage over getting this raw material cheaply. So they sent over envoys to Mobutu and said, hey, guy, you got to leave. We've given you 32 years of power where you were allowed to loot the country and do our dirty work, but now you have to go. And Mobutu said, no. This is my country. Under the Constitution of this country, I am the owner of this country. How dare you tell me to leave my own home? So they had to move to Plan B, which was militarily take them out. Interestingly enough, the United States had only one ally that they could figure out to carry out that mission, which happened to be Museveni in Uganda. And so they decided they had to get him some support. After all, Uganda's what, 1/20th the size of the Congo? You know, maybe 1/10 the size of the population of the Congo? That wouldn't look possible that just one little small country could take on the Congo. So the United States orchestrated a war in Rwanda. How did they do that? They recruited the head of intelligence of the Ugandan army, who happened to be a young man by the name of Paul Kagame, and flew him to Kansas at Fort Leavenworth and trained him and recruited him to work on behalf of the CIA. Now, the interesting thing about Paul Kagame was that at the age of 3, his family was pushed out of Rwanda, and he ended up in Uganda. So, of course, his first language was English, not French. And when he went back to Uganda, he then recruited the other Rwandans who helped Museveni win his military coup in Uganda a number of years earlier, and they began to go across the border from Uganda into Rwanda and attack police stations, military barracks, schools, etc. Then George Bush I lost the election to a guy by the name of Bill Clinton. So when Clinton comes to power, what does he do? He calls for a peace negotiation between the warring factions in Rwanda and Burundi. And he invites the president of the Congo, Mobutu, the president of Kenya, the president of Rwanda, and the president of Burundi to come to Tanzania so they could have a powwow and see if they could meet with these rebels and resolve this problem. And when they did that, and they came up with an agreement, the plane that the U.S. provided for the president of Rwanda and Rwanda and Burundi, the two presidents got back on that plane to fly back home. And interestingly enough, a U.S. missile blew them out of the air. That's what led to what most people now know as the Rwandan genocide. Convenient, huh? But then we look a little further and looking at how the United States uses its military might. They now have 2 countries that can push Mobutu out of power. By the way, Mobutu and the president of Kenya refused to go to that meeting. So Mobutu was still alive at that point. And after Rwanda lost 800,000 people, and let me make something very clear here, Out of the 800,000 that lost their lives in Rwanda, every independent study of that war shows that at least 600,000 of them were Hutus, not Tutsis. So it wasn't a genocide against Tutsis in that war. But secondly, that you had a situation where the government of the newly formed government of Rwanda at the 1994 lines up with the government of Uganda in 1996, about a year and a half later. Now, understand something. The army of Rwanda were mostly people who were members of the army of Uganda, who were Tutsis, who had come back into the new government set up after the war in Rwanda. So they recently came into Rwanda for the first time, or after maybe, like Paul Kagame, left at the age of maybe 3 to 5 to 10 years old. They had been out of the country for many years. Now they're going to be able to create an army matched up with the army of Uganda and march across the border from the eastern part of the Congo to go to Kinshasa to overthrow Mobutu. Now understand the Congo at this point. The Congo has no roads between the eastern part of the Congo and Kinshasa. Uganda has no air force. Rwanda has no air force. So how in the world did these armies make it to Kinshasa? I have to share a personal point here. I was a co-founder of the Anti-Apartheid Movement USA, and in that role, I did a number of speaking engagements around the United States with a gentleman from Namibia by the name of Theo Benguerab, who, when Namibia got its independence, became their first prime minister. In 2006, I paid a visit to Ben in Namibia, and I told him I had just come from the Congo. He said, "Funny you should tell me you came from the Congo. Let me tell you what happened in 1998. In 1998, because the person that was installed as president after they got rid of Mobutu in 1996, as president of the Congo, was a guy by the name of Laurent Kabila, who had been a Congolese freedom fighter who had fought against Mobutu 30-some years earlier, but had been out of the country for at least 28 years, and really didn't understand what was going on in the country when he was installed as president, supposedly by Congolese rebels, but in reality, the army of Uganda and Rwanda. Is that after he got into his country, he began to realize that the government of Uganda and Rwanda was stealing more minerals and selling it on the international market from the Congo than he was able to sell on the international market. And being a nationalist, he decided, that's not going to happen. So he said to the army and government of Uganda and Rwanda, "Thank you very much, but goodbye. You're going to have to go home." And he created his own army of Congolese that escorted Uganda and Rwanda to their borders and told them to stay on their side of the border. So now he's got a Congolese army along the border in 1998. And of course, the United States decided this is not acceptable because we don't know what this guy may do. He may just be selling to the highest bidder, which may mean China. We want control over those minerals. So the Second War gets started in 1998 inside the Congo. And interestingly enough, the army of Uganda and Rwanda ends up in the central part of the Congo. Yet the Congolese armies along the border between Uganda and Rwanda, and they didn't march across the border, and they don't have an air force. And Ben explained to me how they got there. The foreign minister, the guy that had been the foreign minister of Namibia, he said after they got there, it was clear that the army from the Congo could not prevent them from getting to Kinshasa. So the president of the Congo called Zimbabwe, called Namibia, and called Angola and asked for military assistance, and they provided it. And so they defeated the Ugandan and Rwandan troops in the central part of the Congo. And Ben, as Foreign Minister of Namibia and the Foreign Minister of Zimbabwe, was flying in a helicopter surveying the situation because they knew they were responsible for these defeated troops. When all of a sudden, they get a phone call from the Deputy Foreign Minister of Zimbabwe saying, Madeleine Albright wants to talk to you, boss. And he says, tell her I'm busy. He says, no, she's calling every 5 minutes. She wants to talk to you now. So he takes the call and puts it on the, we call it the speaker phone. And Ben's listening to the conversation. Madeleine Albright is asking for permission for the United States to be given permission for air rights so they could send the transport planes back into the Congo to pick up the troops from Uganda and Rwanda, the ones they had left off. So if anyone has a question as to what the role was going on in the war in the Congo, where Rwanda and Uganda killed, by UN estimates, from 1996 to 2006, over 6 million people, in which over 3 million of those who were killed were children below the age of 5. We can understand what happened. And so here's the US government coming to a conclusion that they no longer can depend on Uganda and Rwanda and other troops to do their thing. And so George Bush decides to start African Command, and for the United States to overtly, for the first time, take the lead role in controlling what's going on in Africa. And this is what led to the but the thing that happened, though, was that George Bush wasn't a very popular person amongst African leaders, so he was only allowed to have only 3 military bases built in Africa during his whole administration time. So what does big business do in the United States? They put the money behind a guy by the name of Barack Obama. And for the 8 years that Obama was in office, African Command went from 3 military bases to 84 military bases in Africa. And many people, or my friends, were trying to wonder why I was opposed to Obama becoming a president of the United States. But that's a reality. And so we have a situation now, that the map was showing earlier, of US military bases all over the place. And I have to say to people, understand something. What comes first? Terrorism or US involvement? Look at Afghanistan. In 1978, when the king was overthrown, and the US and Saudi Arabia started first supporting the warlords of Afghanistan, but didn't realize that the warlords was only interested in taking back control over the land that they lost when the king was overthrown. And they stopped fighting. And they figured that they needed soldiers, people who could fight the long haul. And so they started recruiting people from all over the world, to carry out a war against the great Satan of the Soviet Union in Afghanistan. And so what did they do? They worked with Pakistan and the CIA, and Saudi Arabia provided over $40 billion in cash. That's how Osama bin Laden, from Saudi Arabia, ends up over in a cave, if you want to believe he was in a cave, in Afghanistan. A man who had kidney disease and had to do a dialysis. You could see that, right? Him on a kidney machine in a cave somewhere. But that's the story they tell us. And that's what led to the building of Al-Qaeda, and later on, the building of the different groups in Africa, as well as in the Middle East. So it's clear that this is a real problem. And it's a problem led by the capitalist desires of the United States. Okay? And of course, Europe are good lapdogs. We used to call Tony Blair Bush's poodle. You know, but that's the reality. And so you have this grab for the wealth of the minerals. And they tell you places like the Congo is poor. Let me address that issue. The Congo has an estimate of $24 trillion worth of minerals. It has the second largest rainforest in the world. Yes, okay. It has the second largest rainforest in the world. But not only that, it also has the ability, because of the Congolese River and that rainfall, that if you captured it with hydroelectric dams, you could produce enough electricity to meet all of the electric needs of the continent of Africa, from Cairo to Cape Town. It also has, because of its rainfall and its fertile land, it can produce enough food to feed over 9 billion people. This one country. And they're telling, more than the world's only 7 billion right now. And yet they're telling you it's a poor country and we need to raise money to help these poor people. No, we need to stop the looting. So at that, I will bring it to a close.
All right. Thank you. What an amazing panel, if I may.